So yeah, Ivy, this is fucking how we do shit. So
how we roll.
Hello there, and welcome to Melbourne Unreal, where we are mastering music and mastering life. I'm Tony Jack, the Bear Mantz, and we are coming from Deluxe Mastering here in Melbourne, Australia, the world's most livable city. And I'm absolutely rapt to have my good friend Ivan Gough. Ivy,
how you doing, Tony? Good to see you again, mate.
Good to see you as well, mate. It's been a while.
It has been too long, in fact.
So Ivy's here. We're going to have a bit of a chat, just about music and life and shit like that. And for you guys who don't know Ivan, he's a great producer, DJ, and he also has Neon Records. Is your label?
Yes, I'm involved. Yeah.
With who's? Oh, yeah.
Well, we're connected with this. Currently, we're connected with the Universal Group.
Yep.
It's myself and Smiley and Carl and a few of the boys. I'm more just an artist these days. That's signed,
yep.
But yeah, they're in the Universal Music sphere.
Yeah.
Amongst the group there. Yeah.
So Ivy's involved in all of that, and I've known you for how long, mate? With over 15 years, or
longer than that, my friend. Yeah, I reckon. You'd have to be talking 20 nearly, wouldn't it?
Almost 20, yeah. And,
probably the late 90s anyway, I was not sure.
Yeah.
So you're probably talking at least 16 or 17, I reckon.
Yeah, for a long time. So so it's just good to have you here, man, because this podcast is really about just talking to people, industry people who doing really well at it, and just sharing their journey about how they got there, and just talking about the challenges in life, and talking about where things are at. So why don't we just rewind back a bit, because I remember when I first met you, you used to rock a ponytail back in the day. You're a
Gee, you are going back in time now.
Yeah, and you were DJing. And where originally was it, Franks? Because you were involved with the Vicious Boys, and they were.
Yeah, I was involved with John and Andy in the early days, but I started out in the eastern suburbs, out in initially, the first gig I had was on a Wednesday night. Could you believe it? Was out.
You remember it's a Wednesday?
Yeah, I remember because I had a full-time job at the time, and I used to come in from the gig at about 3:30, and then I have to get up 2 hours later to go to work.
Yeah.
So I wasn't much good on Thursdays at work, that's for sure. But yeah, it was at the Croydon Hotel. It was a club called Area.
Yeah.
Working for a bloke called Stewie Harrison, who's a bit of a legendary raconteur around the scene in Melbourne. Yeah, so I started out there, and then from there I kind of pretty quickly got around to most of the clubs in the eastern suburbs at the time. So there was the KTs at the Knox Tavern. I played at Stylus,
Juice
nightclub. We played at the Memphis Club in Bulleen. There was High Society in Doncaster.
How different do you think back then? What clubland was like in Melbourne back then as opposed to now?
Oh Jesus, it was well, you know what? It was just not commercial. I mean, it was not big. The clubs that were all successful, most of the entertainment you got in the suburb clubs was pretty much retro music sort of nights. So you had a lot of 70s and 80s disco and electro records getting played, a lot of party records, pub rock kind of anthems, Like when I played in some of these joints, biggest records were tracks by like K-San by Cold Chisel, or You Shook Me All Night Long, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And gradually, and I think at that time, there was a small group of us, and a lot of them were DJs. We were sneaking off to what were then warehouse parties on the weekend, and trying to discover as much as we could about this new style of music that was coming through called house music, and of course techno and stuff went along with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly the suburb clubs were a lot more of a sort of, I guess, a party sort of venue.
Yeah.
I suppose back then.
And I guess what the aspiration back then was to play in the city and play in the bigger nightclubs.
No, my aspiration was always the same. I wanted to produce records. I was a fan of sound. I've always been a fan of sound, and I was. It's one of the reasons why I like listening to. There are certain, like I love listening to records produced by Phil Spector.
Yeah, right.
I'm fascinated by how he got that sound.
The wall of sound.
The wall of sound.
Mm.
I was fascinated with the sound that ABBA got on their records in the 70s, because they used a lot of Phil Spector's techniques. I was fascinated with the Beatles in the 60s, and not so much about their songwriting, but about the kind of the trickery that they used in the studio.
Yeah.
And I remember, I remember hearing, some records in the 80s, and I used to put headphones on, and I would wonder how they managed to make that snare drum have that sort of squashy kind of doof sort of, how are they doing that, And it was just fascinating to me. And I always, when I started out, the first time I went into a recording studio was a studio in Ringwood, called Timber Top Studios. Remember a guy called, I think it was Richard McLean or something. Anyway, I remember the first time because I started buying music magazines because I was riding the train every day and I needed something to read because I was going to work in the city at the time. So I started buying music magazines like Sonics and stuff, and then I kept seeing all this technology and I started to figure it out. I sort of joined the dots and went, okay, this is how they're making these noises with these effects units and these synthesizer things, you know. And so I remember the first time I went into Timbertop Studios in Ringwood, and I just was like, I'm home.
Yeah, right.
I know I belong here somehow, and I stayed there. I worked there for about 3 months just assisting. But the guy said to me at the end of it, he said, "Look, you're not going to be an engineer."
Yeah.
And I got all upset. I said, "Oh, that's what I want to do with my life." He said, "No, because he said your career is producing. You love producing. You love sounds. You love making sounds.
Yeah.
So you should follow that kind of dream." And so after that, I decided I wanted to be a producer, and I started DJing. And this is getting back to the answer to your original question. I started DJing because I figured that if I DJ'd, I could earn enough money to then be able to spend my week making records, and I wanted to produce, and I started buying. I had at that point started collecting microphones and recording equipment. As soon as I went to clubs and I heard house music, and then I figured out where house music was coming from, drum machines and samplers, I sold all the recording equipment and started buying drum machines and samplers and
all the technology,
turntables, and all of a sudden, he was this guy who was going to make, record rock bands. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I decided that was rubbish. I wanted to become Australia's answer to Arthur Baker or something. Yeah. Off I went. It was crazy.
It was great. Well, I remember you, man. Like back, we used to get on the phone and talk, quite often. And I remember clear as day, man. You always had that vision, and you're just like, I don't know, Tony. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make it, and I'm going to buy this gear, and I'm going to learn how to do it. And it was driven in you, man. I remember from way back then, and you were just so fucking inspiring. Because it was just really good to be able to talk to someone who was on the same page, who was just enthusiastic and motivated. You always had that attitude, man. Always.
I was just driven. I suppose I've always been in that sense driven. I guess when I was I remember sitting on the train, and I used to, because I didn't have headphones or a Walkman, or I couldn't afford one back then. Yeah. I used to ride the train to work, and I used to sit there, and I would imagine songs in my head.
Yeah.
And I was always imagining the sound that I was going to get on these, drum sounds and all that. It just, for me, that was the drive. It was just like I want to make things that sound good and make people feel excited.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard a synthesizer. I was in a shopping centre many years ago, and I don't know if you remember the old Brash's.
Oh yeah, I bought my first guitar from Brash's.
Right. We went into Brash's. We're in the local shopping centre, and I walk into Brash's, and I hear this noise coming from across the shopping centre. Yeah. So I'm like, what is that going on over there? Yeah. And I must have been, 12 or 13 or something. And I said to my mum, I'm going over there. You come back and get me from Brash's when you finish shopping. Yeah. And I stood there, and there was a guy, and he had they were doing a demo of a Roland Juno 106.
106, yeah, I remember those, yep.
And I just stood there, and I was like, and because I'd heard records up to that point. I think a record that was really key for me in the early days was probably Vienna by Ultravox.
Ultravox, yeah.
And after I saw this guy playing on the synth, straight away I was like, that's where those sounds come from, Yeah. And because my father had played during the 70s, late 70s, I'd heard he played a lot of Rick Wakeman records.
Oh yeah.
And Rick Wakeman was always, fiddling on the key.
Was it the 6 was, the 8 was ahead with the 8?
Yeah, Journey to the Center of the Earth. That was the one he played a lot. I can still remember it. Yeah. And I remember, wondering where these sounds were coming from. When I saw this synthesizer, I was like, okay, some of the pictures becoming clear now. And I remember I went home that night, and I was dreaming, how am I going to get myself one of those synthesizers, Yeah. And so I think it was, it was 3 or 4 years later, I was working school holidays with my father. Yeah. And he was, probably only paying me $20 a day. But by the end of school holidays, I had enough money to put the deposit down on a synthesizer at the local music shop, and started that also kind of kicked off the musical journey. But as I said, in the early days, originally I was actually thinking about recording more than producing and stuff like that. But yeah, that was where the earliest kind of stuff. That's where it all began for me. And as I said, the first time I heard a synthesizer, I was like, I was obsessed with the sounds you could make with this thing. What happens if I turn those knobs? What happens if I turn these two together? Yeah. This one, Yeah. It was mind-boggling to me at the time.
Yeah. So tell me, so fast forwarding, you got in with the Vicious Boys. You got to do it, which was great. Even back in the day when they started in Frankston, and from their humble beginnings.
Well, I mean, you got to remember that it wasn't so long ago. I mean, dance music and I guess the whole sort of monster that is EDM, if you like, has really sort of taken over the airways over the last 3 or 4 years. And certainly the festivals and have been dominated by that kind of music. But it wasn't so long ago when, dance music just wasn't getting played on radio. It wasn't commercial at all.
I mean, yeah.
And we were looking for, at the time, I remember hearing, I was connected with some guys who, well, actually, it initially started with listening to radio, and on Triple R, I'm going to say Triple R, I believe it was Triple R, there was a show called Rhythmatic, and it was hosted by David Carboni and Steve Robbins and Richie McNeil, Richie Rich. And I used to listen to it, and they used to play these imported dance records that were straight off the hot off the bandwagon, so to speak, from Europe. And that was, and I remember, in fact, I can even remember before that. Actually, there is another story. I used to be a CB radio enthusiast, and I was up on the roof putting up a CB radio antenna one time on the roof of my parents' house. Fortunately, it didn't fall off and break my neck. Yeah. And while I was up there, I thought, I could put an FM antenna up here because I had an FM tuner in my bedroom. I thought, and then I can pick up some further away stations. Yeah. And I used to listen to 3RPP, which was radio on the peninsula.
Yeah.
And they used to play on Saturday nights. They used to broadcast straight out of the 21st Century Dance Club
in Frankston, right?
And I used to hear Johnny, and I used to hear Albert Zabilla, and I used to hear these records. This is kind of, I guess, proto house sort of stuff. Yeah. It's before I really knew what house music was, but I heard it and I was like dragged in straight away.
Yeah.
Into this thing, and then later on, I went and got into. I got into listening to this Rhythmatic show on Triple R, and the records that they were playing were even stranger. They were like, this was music from outer space. And when I finally started going clubbing to places, I saw John Course DJ.
Yep.
And I was like, this guy is my hero right now.
Incredible.
He was just amazing. And then him and Andy together, we used to go to Sanction on a Tuesday night at the Chevron. We used to go to, sometimes we drive down to 21st Century on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. But I literally got so excited about all this, but I was initially kind of confused about how they were actually making these sounds. I didn't know what a 909 drum machine was, or a 303, any of these sort of boxes. So I started pestering John and Andy, and I used to drive John bonkers because I was a pest. I was an absolute pest. But fortunately, I got to know him well enough, and then we started DJing together at a place called Juice Nightclub in Ringwood.
Yep.
Anyway, the guy who played in the back room at Juice Nightclub, another DJ called Noel Mahal, a friend of mine, he came in one day and he had a bit of studio. He had a small studio in his bedroom, and I had a small studio in my garage. Yeah. And so we talked about making a record. He said, "Oh, I've got this track that I've been working on. I'll bring it in on a tape." And so he brings in this tape and plays it to me. And I said, "You know what, Noel? That's pretty cool. How about we get together in the studio and at my place, because I was in a garage, it was a bit more set up than his." Yeah. I said, and maybe we can finish it. Yeah. So he brings it over. We spent, I don't know, I guess a week working on it. And then the next Friday night, when I was playing with John Course, I said, "John, come into the back room. I've got this cassette. I've got to play this track that me and Noel have been working on." Yeah. So I played it to Johnny, and because I knew he had the label, and he was an enthusiast, and he was just such a hardworking guy. He was. I mean, absolute respect for John and Eddie. What they were doing in the early days was no one else was doing it really. Yeah. You know,
look, they were pioneers. They were pioneers.
They were working out of a garage in the back of Frankston,
and they fucking changed the landscape, man. I mean, and look where they are now. I mean, they're just fucking rock, and they have been for a long time. Yeah. I mean, they've just been going on an upward trajectory.
Totally. So I played it to Coursey, and this track, and Coursey goes, "Oh, that's actually pretty cool." He goes, "Maybe I'll, So he played it to Andy, and they're like, "Yeah, we want to sign this. We'll get it mixed." And so we made a few little arrangement changes, and then we took it into a proper studio. Back in those days, you had to take all your synthesis and everything into the studio. And of course, I remember going to the session in the city, and we had a guy called Tony Espy who was mixing it for us.
I remember Tony, yeah.
Tony was a great engineer.
Totally.
And we went into the studio, and I reckon we got to the last synthesizer, and I realised I'd left a special power supply for it back home, so I had to drive all the way back out to the suburbs.
Fuck.
So 2 hours later, we got started. Anyway, long story short, they signed it. They released it. The track was called "I Need You" by Pendulum.
Yep, I remember that track. Yeah. That did massive. That was
Well,
massive.
you know what the funny thing was, because at this stage, everything that was going on overseas, particularly what was going on in Europe at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, house music was exploding, and we were just watching it from back here, and going, man, it's big here, but over there it was just like a multi-billion-dollar enterprise.
Yeah.
So anyway, a couple of weeks after, a few months after the track got released, because it actually got a release in the UK. Mm-hmm. A couple of months later, I get a frantic phone call from Stuart, who was running DMC Records back then, and he's like, mate, I've got this tape here. It's a Pete Tong Essential Selection, and it was the Essential Mix, and it was live from the Q Club in Birmingham, featuring Paul Oakenfold, was the DJ.
Yeah.
And he goes, he's playing your record. And I'm like, nah, man, he's tripping. So I come into the office, and he puts the cassette on, and you can hear the crowd, and sure enough, in the middle of it, here's this record that we made.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fucking hell, this is amazing. This was a life-changing experience for me. I was like, wow, this is, okay. And Paul Oakenfold, I actually met him, I don't know, maybe 12 or 18 months after that. And I remember saying to him, I said, oh, you used to play one of my records. And I told him what it was. And he was like, oh, dude, that was an amazing tune. And, and it was a real catalyst. But if it wasn't for John and Andy, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Those guys were very influential. And I worked with them on and off. I still work with them on and off. But really, we spent the better part of I don't know, 15 years doing bits and pieces.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, they're definitely legends. I'll hopefully get one of those two guys in here eventually, because that'd be a great guy to catch up and talk about.
Oh, I've no doubt that they'll get down here and chat to you at some point.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be great, because again, legends of the industry.
Yes,
they've fucking done
super
it.
talented guys
and lovely fellas too.
Well, they were just enthusiastic. They took a hold of that sort of DIY spirit in the early days in the early 90s. No one gave a shit about house music. I mean, clubs was telling us at some points, clubs were saying, oh, this music's not going to be big, it's just a flash in the pan. Even the DJs, a lot of the city DJs who were playing sort of Italo disco and all that kind of stuff, they didn't really think that house music was going to take off.
Yeah. It always happens with any new style. Something new comes along, anything that's underground, and then before it crosses over, people kind of dismiss it, and then as more and more people get onto it, crosses over, becomes popular.
Totally.
It's just a cycle that happens.
Totally. And that's, it just captivated. I remember the first time I went to a club, a friend of mine dragged me to a club. He said, we're going to go to this club to listen to house music, and I misunderstood. I thought we were going to a house party to listen to some music. He said, no, this is a nightclub.
Yeah.
They play house music. And I'm like, great. What's that?
Yeah.
They're like, and it was we went to the underground.
Yeah, right.
In fact, I think I might have been a little bit underage at the time.
Yeah. Just a tad.
Yes, just a tad. I was just a tad. I think I might have been 17 or something. But anyway, long story short, we walked in, and it was just like a bomb went off in my head. I was like, I'd heard some of this stuff on radio, but I didn't really, to have a whole night of it fed to me with strobes and smoke machine, and I was like, wow, this is,
Yeah.
But
But it just goes to show how, sometimes kids say to me, oh, fuck, I can't start something, I've got no money. But here's a great example of you and John and Andy starting from nothing. And I tell kids, it's not about having money, you just need a better strategy.
Yeah.
And just...
I love that. That's a great... Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way of describing it, really. Just get a better strategy.
And be resourceful, and there's always people out there who are going to help you. I remember I started my business when I coming back from overseas. I had no fucking money, but this guy called Rob Stiles was I went and had a chat to him, and he was prepared to say, look, because there was no sound tool system in the city at the time, right? The whole digital audio thing was completely fucking new, right?
Yeah, it would have been.
So he said, look, I'll tell you what, you're still not a nice guy. You happen to know people that you know people that I know. I just want to get some machines in the field. How about we do this? I'll let you take one of these and an Apple and all this sort of shit, computer, so people can come out and see you how it works in the field, and you can just sort of pay me off in installments.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for that, mate, I wouldn't have got my start.
Well, the DIY sort of. I mean, we had to. The thing about it is too. I mean, I guess like the thing today, it's cheap. I mean, you buy a computer and download your sound packs and some plugins, and off you go. Back then, I mean, it was costly business. I remember one of the guys that I work with. He got a job. One of the young guys that we were buying studio equipment together. He got a job in playing down at the Rest Point Casino
in
down in Hobart, and he was. It wasn't the most illustrious job, but he took it because he was getting paid top money, and he was basically they said, we're going to put you up in the casino. We'll give you meals and we'll pay you this amount of dollars. And so he said to me, he said, look, I can send some money back every month, and we can just pour it into studio equipment.
Yeah.
So we were buying samplers and synths and stuff that we probably wouldn't have been able to afford if you didn't do it. But we had to do this. I mean, this is like, we need more gear to make better records. Let's go,
Yeah.
So, and pretty quickly back then, we had, 20, 30 grand's worth of gear.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what you need to get started, because
Yeah.
there wasn't really any cheap computer systems.
Yeah,
that did
and there was
what they
no
did.
internet and no plugins and all that kind of shit going on.
If you wanted to record audio, you needed a sampler. You couldn't do it on a computer.
You know, it was all different back then. No,
Absolutely.
For sure. Well, I remember, mate, one of the one of the great things you used to tell me, and which I think is one of your great qualities, is how you were pragmatic. You know, I remember again, one of our many conversations, but I remember you being very frustrated about playing progressive music and clubs and shit like that, and people used to give you shit. Well, I don't know if they gave you shit, but maybe they gave you shit. But certainly, you were one of the smart DJs who, at the time, said, "Okay, I'm going to be smart about this. I'm going to play commercial gigs during the week, and that'll fucking pay me, and that'll allow me to then play the fucking gigs where I want to play the music I want to play."
Yeah.
And you know, whereas a lot of guys are sort of like, you know what, no, this is all I'm going to do. And look, I admire them for the fact that they wanted to stick to their...
Mate, I can remember a week when I played at Wild Bill's on Wednesday night.
Yep.
Down at Southland Shopping Centre. Right. Commercial party gig for mostly the surf kids.
Yeah. And
then on Saturday night I was playing at Sunny.
Yeah. How good was that club? How good was that club?
Mate, and I have to say, I've had to straddle a lot of fences over the years. You know, I've done a lot of different things, and some people invariably don't understand how your perspective on the world is. And I think for me, it's always been about whatever I got to do to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
You know, and that has it has put me in some good situations. It's put me in some difficult situations in the past. I've had to make choices that I haven't always been comfortable with, but I've always done. I can. It's like my father who passed away a couple of years ago. He always used to say to me, "You know what? Shut your mouth, roll your sleeves up, and get on with it."
Yeah.
And I've always done that. I've always tried as much as possible to just do whatever I have to do to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And it's a tough business, you know. The music industry goes through a lot of undulations. There's good and bad periods, and I have been fortunate enough to be able to do it for 20 years and still be able to I think, as I said, before, I can still do what I need to do to keep moving forward. I'm a chameleon. I've changed my spots. What I normally do is I figure out what are the sort of parameters in which I need to operate to make some money, and then how can I do what I want to do and meet sort of halfway.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always tried to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I've changed my spots a lot. I like a lot of different kinds of music.
I think you have to. You can't look. As I said, I respect people that are purists and they say, look, we're going to stick to our values, if you will, and we're not going to deviate at all. And look, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, man, you got to fucking eat and you got to pay bills. But
it's not even that. It's not even. It's even more like for me. And I know. I mean, I remember when when I was doing the I guess the traditional prog thing. We were making the kind of records that were big with Sasha and John Digweed and stuff. And then a bit later on in my career, I started sort of making records that were working with dance floors. People like Axwell and stuff were. And somebody, people would say to me, why did you kind of go from that to that? Yeah. It's like, because I like this. I actually like, I remember going to, I'm going to say Future Music Festival. It might have been Summer Days. I think it was Future Music Festival. It was in about 2007. Mm-hmm. And I was hanging out with Axwell. And I watched him up on stage playing, I guess what was an early version of the sort of big room kind of house music. And I loved it. I stood there and I went, wow, man, that's one of the best DJ sets I've ever seen. And I also equally rate a set that I saw in 1995 with Sasha.
Yeah, right.
Playing at I think it was the Palace or something in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. I've got my favourite DJ sets come from a lot of genres and a lot of different people.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to be. I mean, to appreciate music, you've got to go cover the whole spectrum, don't you?
I do.
Because there's someone said to me, what's your favourite style of music? I say, well, there's only one style. That's good. And of course, good subjective, but I think it's important that you're open to all kinds of stuff because.
I think you made a comment there, though, that it's probably the most valuable comment of anyone's ever said. Music is always subjective.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks that their taste in music is shit.
This is true.
People always, if you can sit down with somebody, and the thing about it is too, I think a lot of the people who have what they consider to be, I guess, better taste in music than others, some of those people are usually quite annoying.
Yeah. The classic chin strokers.
Oh yeah, I know. The noodles can be quite annoying. But you know what? I do look. My taste in music is very broad, but I have to say that, like everyone else, I think my taste in music is good.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of stuff right across a lot of genres.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people maybe you do, maybe you don't know, but Ivan was part of TV Rock with Grant Smiley back in the day, and I love the story of just tell us about Flaunt It, mate, and because. When I remember when I was working at Sing Sing, we mastered that tune. As soon as I heard, I told you, mate, this is fucking gonna go bananas. It's gonna fucking the Earth will change its fucking axis.
Well, we were I mean, I was a deep house guy mainly, and back then deep house was a little bit different, but I was certainly into more kind of not as energetic, I guess, and that's mostly what I guess to this day it's still mostly the music that I listen to. But anyway, at the time we had this deep house record that we were working on. It was a sort of a prog thing, and I remember Grant coming into the studio one day and he said to me, he says, "Oh, I just did this this show last night with these guys, and they had a rapper," and I kind of went, "Okay, Australian rapper, not sure that's going to work on this record. It's not the right kind of, even an American rapper probably wouldn't be really. It's not the kind of record. It doesn't, And then I kind of started thinking, you know what, maybe that's why it might work, because it is unlike. So then he said, he's got this really dark kind of voice, a bit sort of, I guess, a Barry White-esque rap thing that he does, and I'm like, okay, let's give it a shot. And I remembered hearing some other older kind of Detroit style music that had a bit of rapping on it that was quite dark and underground. And so I kind of went, you know what, maybe we'll do. So we got Shawnee B into the studio, and I sat him down and said, and he showed me some lyrics. And I kind of, well, that's kind of cool, and let's go in that direction and talk about what it's like at 3 a.m. on a dance floor. Yeah. So anyway, I put him in front of the mic. We recorded this thing down. I go, this is pretty cool, And I played it to a few people. And the funny thing is, we got to a point with it where we were like, at that stage, the records that were starting to become, I guess, bigger in clubs, things like I See Girls, there was house mix of Milkshake by Khalees, it was quite big, and there was a little bit more of a kind of slightly, I guess, an open filtered synthesizer electro kind of sound thing. So I said, let's do a mix that has some of that as well. Yeah. And everybody said, no, we don't need a mix like that. I said, no, trust me, it could just tip the scales on this record a little bit. So I did this version and I started playing it out, and it got some okay reactions, but it wasn't a game changer. Yeah. We took it to all the record companies, and all the record companies heard it and went, yeah, it's kind of all right, but I don't know if anyone would really be into this. So then Grant's gone, all right, bugger this. He was working with the guys at Nova. He said, look, I'm going to get him to see if they'll play it for us. Just give it one shot. Yeah. And Nova had this thing on called The Crash Test. Right. And it was an afternoon thing, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They would just play a random record they thought was kind of cool and see how people reacted to it. Yeah. So they were like, okay, we've got this new record from these guys, heavy rock, flaunt it, bang, play the record. And the phones lit up. Yeah. And they were like, oh, that's not a bad reaction. So the day later, they did the same thing. Hey, we played this yesterday, it kind of went well, we're going to crash test it again. Right. So then, after 2 or 3 times playing it, they went, you know what, it seems like people like this record, so we're going to put it on our nighttime show. And they had a nightly chart thing going on back then. Yeah. And I think it was the top 20 or something like that. Yeah. So they put it on, and it started to climb the charts. Mm. And after about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, probably 3 weeks. By this stage, it was up to number 3 on the chart. Wow. And then we got the phone call from the guys at Sony. Simon Cahill, who was A&R for them at the time, just goes, look, I've spoken to the bosses. We want to sign this record. We can see something's going to happen here. Yeah. At that stage, Nova started playing it. They were A-listing it around the country. Yep. It was just picking up steam. So then, I reckon it was about March. It was not... No, it might have been a bit earlier, actually. Mm. It was about 4 or 5 weeks before it went to number 1. Mm-hmm. And I was in outback New South Wales, on my way back. We were driving back from Byron Bay back to Melbourne. And I remember pulling into this petrol station, and it was fairly outback sort of place. I can't remember where it was. Mm. And I get out of the petrol station, and on the speaker I can hear the track. Right. And I went, this record's going to do all right, I reckon. This is going to go okay. And as I was listening to it while I filling my car up with petrol, I kept thinking, I know what, it's going to work because this doesn't sound like anything else on radio. Yeah. Still doesn't. It was definitely very different. In some respects, I guess it was probably a sort of novelty kind of record at the time because it was different. It was really different. So, so after that, it just kind of got legs of its own, and next thing you know, we had a number 1 hit in our hands. Yeah. Fucking double platinum, dude. That was the biggest. We're triple now. Triple now. Yeah, triple now. I don't know. A couple of years back, we went triple, I think. Wow, gee, how good's that? The market's just. Oh, look, it was an amazing record, and it certainly did a lot for our career. Internationally and stuff. Oh, no doubt. Because that really was the springboard to you being able to DJ overseas and just we started doing a lot of festivals and stuff on the back of that. So you enjoyed touring, or have you enjoyed touring? Yeah, no. Parts of it have been amazing. I've gotten to see a lot of amazing places. Probably my favourite location in the world was always Mykonos. I had a lot of fun on Mykonos. Yeah, did some good gigs there. it's where I met the Phoenix Paul guys. We, I did some records with them.
Yeah.
I hung out with a lot of international DJs there. It was Mykonos was kind of my second home there at one point. I'd go over there for 2 or 3 weeks, and I used to jet off from there to other locations to do shows.
Yeah.
But Mykonos certainly was good. I always enjoyed playing in Brazil. Brazil was good fun. A lot of pretty girls and a good vibe. They're a very, very kind of up for it crowd in Brazil.
Yeah. And good food.
Oh, the Brazilian, the churrascaria.
Yeah.
Yeah, I brought that recipe home. Actually, I stole the recipe for picanha, which is their main.
Because that's the other thing. You love cooking. I remember when we talked. You told me about all the shit you barbecue and curries. You're a curry man.
I own 6 barbecues now.
Yeah. Are you serious?
Yeah. Dead serious. And I'm about to buy a 7th.
You going? Do you do the smoking thing as well?
Well, I've got a pellet smoker, but I haven't actually hooked it up yet. We bought a house last year, and we've got a studio to build and deck and lots of things to do to the place. Yeah. And I don't have a lot of space. It's a kind of slopey odd block at the moment, so. The pellet smoker is in its box. It's staying in the garage.
So a pellet smoker, what? That takes pellets, a special pellets? Or?
Yeah. In America, you've got there's many different types, but the pellet smokers there's 2 or 3 brands. Mine's called a Green Mountain Grill, and it's basically you buy these bags of like chook pellets,
right?
And they have flavouring. You can get flavoured pellets, and you pour them into a hopper, right? Little thing, and then what it does, it's like a low and slow cooking, but it's temperature controlled, so you can dial it up. See, most of the smoking they do is in what they call an offset smoker, where they have a barrel on one side and then a smaller barrel, and they fill the smaller barrel with the wood, and then the smoke goes from that into the main chamber and smokes the meat.
Right.
The problem with that is 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you've got to get up and stoke the fire up, and because a low and slow cook sometimes can take 16 hours.
Yeah.
So if you're cooking for a Saturday night meal, you have to start at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, getting your fire ready, and then you've got to get up overnight, and it's a pain in the neck. Yeah. What the pellet smoker does, you fill the hopper with pellets, and then what it does is you dial up the temperature, and it will then, I think it's about 105 degrees is optimum, it rolls the little pellets on, it sort of monitors the temperature inside the chamber, and if it starts to go down, it rolls a couple more pellets onto the thing. So it'll go for 12, 14 hours by itself.
Oh, right. So that's nice.
So you can sleep, and then you get up at lunch in the morning, check it all.
Yeah.
And then, and there's other things you can do too. The pellet smokers have, there's mods you can make to them so you can get more smoke on your meats and stuff like that. But the pellet smoker, it's kind of like a temperature controlled oven, but it's actually it's actually a smoker, a barbecue smoker.
Yeah.
So it takes the guesswork out of it. Yeah. And for a guy like me who doesn't have a lot of free time, and a guy who likes to sleep, I don't want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to stoke the fire. So.
Can't so blame you.
Nah.
Now, one other thing about you that people don't know, and again, one thing I love about you, man, is for a long, long period of time, you've been a bloke who's been very invested in developing artists and talent and stuff.
Absolutely, 100%.
And I remember the first protege, if you will, that I remember when you were at DMC back in the 90s, you introduced me to this young 18-year-old kid called Luke Charbel.
Yes.
Who has gone on to...
He did great things, yes.
Amazing.
He's still doing great things.
Absolutely.
Love Luke.
Shout out to Luke. Fucking, he's a legend. And
no, I don't actually like him.
You love him?
No.
You what?
No, he's a douchebag. Sorry.
No, he's
a good guy, Luke. Me and Luke have got a lot in common, actually.
Yeah, he's
similar humour and similar sense of humour, and so he's a good guy.
And but he was just one of these kids like Andy Page. Like as soon as he come on the scene, just just create. But you helped develop this kid. You gave him opportunities to get in there. You've done it for a lot of people, and I think it's great, man, that you and you don't make any song and dance about it. Again, this is why I'm fucking mentioning it. But I think it's great that it's important that it's acknowledged and people know about it. But you've always been helping people. You've always been fucking positive about helping young kids, and you've just always given time to kids as well, mate.
I'm still doing it.
Absolutely.
I try to. My mother in her little study at home, she has a little thing on the wall, and it's I can't remember the exact comment, but it's something along the lines of, it says something about long after I'm gone, it won't matter how much stuff that I owned, but the world might be a different place because of the difference I made in the mind of a child.
Yeah. And
I looked at that and read it one day when my mum stuck it up. I sat there and thought, that's a really good sentiment. And I think for me, I like the idea that I can leave behind some stuff when I'm not doing this anymore, whether I'm just retired or gone forever. Doesn't matter. The reality is I'm happy, and it makes me feel good to know that I've sort of helped out some younger guys break into the business, and it's one of the upsides, I suppose, of doing what I do. It makes you feel good. Totally. And some of them have gone on to doing some pretty great things. I mean, Luke's done amazing things.
Yeah.
I pulled the Fanx Paul guys into the studio a couple of years back and said, look, let's make a record. And because of the record we made, in my mind, they're now based in LA, working with a lot of big name people over there.
Yeah.
I'm working with a young guy at the moment, Jeremy Jebu, who is the same. You know, I've given him some opportunities, and he's now producing some tracks for pop artists and stuff. You know, like, I love that. I really do. It gives me a kick. I love seeing people that I've worked with who are doing well.
Yeah, I think it's important, man.
You've done it too. You've worked with a lot of young people. You've given up a lot of your free time for your mastering drives and other things, for helping out the community. It makes you feel good, and you look at something and go, you know what, I helped do that. That's kind of cool.
But I think it's important too, man, because it's that whole thing of giving back. I mean, you and I, we're so fortunate, man, that we get to do what we absolutely love. And yes, of course, we've had to go over hurdles, and we've had obstacles and challenges like anyone else. But at the end of the day, every fucking day, man, we do what we love, and we get paid to do it, and we get paid pretty well, and we get to have as I tell people, I may not be rich, but I live richly.
Yeah.
And I never forgot, for me, the thing that really drove me before I started with a lot of mentoring was that when I was a kid, mate, and I went to America fucking knocking on studio doors, you know, big name engineers were happy. They didn't know me from a bar of shit.
Yeah.
But they were just impressed with the fact that I was prepared to go overseas with no money and sleep on a couch and do whatever. And they were prepared to help, not just with this end of it, but with the life stuff as well, as far as growing up. You know, so I can never pay these people back. There's nothing I can do for those people. So it's just
that's
paying
what happened
forward,
with me and the first guy that owned Timber Top Studios in Ringwood. I pestered him a few times. He obviously knew, he wanted to see that I was determined.
Yeah, of course.
So the first time I knocked on his door, he said, no, we don't need any assistance here at the moment. And then I said, right, I'm coming back twice next week. And then the week after that, I came back 4 times. And eventually, after, you know, half a dozen or more visits, he goes, all right, you can come in. And he was the same. He gave me an opportunity, and you know, I've tried to do that as much as I can. I'm still looking for talent. I mean, I think the other thing too is, if I hear some genuine talent in something, I want to expose it. I want to show people, hey, you know what? First time I heard Luke Sharple's records, he was a trance kid. You know, he grew up listening to trance records, and he was, you know, a big fan of guys like Ferry Corsten and stuff. And I remember hearing him, and he had a bunch of demos, and I was like, these are good. There's this good stuff in here. You know, it needs to be kind of pulled apart a bit. And then I sort of, when I met him, because it was actually through a mutual friend that I heard the demo. And then when I met him, I was like, you know, this kid's cocky and a bit sort of...
You got a bit of a swagger about him.
A bit of swagger about him.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what, he's going to need that, so come with me. So I pulled him into the studio, and then, yeah, sure enough, 2 years later, he was, you know, on the road to becoming a bit of a star in the prog scene. You know?
Yeah. No. So no. Well, as you said, I think it's important that we do that, and we'll something that we should keep doing, my friend. You know, because
I remember when Luke played me his mix he'd done of Sasha's record Cloud Cuckoo, which was one of his strongest mixes.
Yeah.
It certainly was a bit of a gut, because I remember when one of his mates played it on BBC Radio, and phones lit up, and what the hell was that mix? But I remember when he played that to me, he goes, "What do you think of that?" And I went, "I quit." I'm out, man. You've made this record in you know, it took him about a day or something to knock most of it out, and I was just like, but that's good. It's a good feeling.
So tell me, for any kids that are watching, in your opinion, like, because it's a different era now. Because I mean, back when you and I started, it was about knocking on studio doors and becoming assistants and doing all the shitty jobs. I mean, these days that kind of thing doesn't. I think I tell kids these days, freelancing is where it's at. You know, just got to learn, because now they've got the internet, they've got tutorials, they've got all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
But so what would you tell a kid these days who is, you know, out of high school or maybe in early years of college, they want to produce, they want to get into music, they want to do something in this realm. What do you think would be the best approach a kid would take, in your opinion, to get a start?
Look, I have to say that one of the things that I've always lived by, and it was I actually saw Jerry Seinfeld mention, he mentioned this in an interview with Andrew Denton on TV a few years back, and he said bust your ass. only good things will come from it. And I think that's something that I've kind of gotten from my father. It's like, I knew from early on, because originally I wanted to have a career in electronics, and that fell away because I knew straight away when I was in the studio, I knew this is where I have to be amongst this. Synthesizers, samplers, tape machines, amplifiers, all this kind of stuff, and mixing consoles, and all that. And so I guess I had hunger from the start, and I think that's the most important thing for anyone in this business is stay hungry. Stay hungry. Make sure and just keep busting your ass. The second thing I would say is use your loaf to come up with some strategies. And I think the first thing you need to do is think about spending as much time. Like, for example, a lot of the young producers come to me, and one of the big problems is they send me all these tracks. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And so much of it just sounds like everything else. Especially with the EDM stuff, particularly, there's a big problem with that. It's like, you know what? You play this record in amongst 15 other records like this, I couldn't tell whose record's who. So the first thing I would say to people is start off by, first of all, setting yourself some goals. And the first thing that I would suggest that you did is ask yourself this one simple question. This is what I do. I work with a lot of artists. I'm doing a lot of co-producing work and songwriting with people and stuff. Ask yourself this one very simple question. How are you going to stand out? How are you going to stand out? Because there are 100 million people making records at the moment.
Totally.
How are you going to stand out? Because if you're not going to figure out a way to do that, you're dead in the water right from the start. Okay? Now, sometimes it's and I think this era of EDM where there are a lot of people who were just downloading sample packs and downloading, track beds from other people, and they were making records out of other people's records. I think that era is passing, and now particularly in Australia, a lot of Australians are starting to look back and say, okay, we want some more quality, we want some songwriting, we want to see people who can actually deliver the goods. Not just people who are paying for producers to make their records for them, and DJs who spend more money on their gold jackets than they do on learning how to. And I think with that it's a good era at the moment. The ground is fertile. If you're coming along and doing something a bit different at the moment, it's a good time to be doing that. So that's what I would tell people is figure out how you're going to stand out. Bust your ass, keep working at it, and figure out, even if you have to take a part-time job just so you can find the time and the money to do what you want to do, bust your ass. Because eventually something will happen.
I think the part-time job thing is important. I think some people are worried who want to be artistic that they worry that it's an either-or scenario, and they kind of go that, well, if I can't, I'm not going to make money as an artist, therefore I'm going to have to do a job, but only a job. Whereas you've got to balance it too. I mean, even when I started my business, dude, I was 40 years of age when I got to the point where my mastering business had enough critical mass where I didn't have to do extra fucking work. So I think that's part of the deal now, man.
When I started DJing, for me, it was a bit of a. I remember my folks, my dad particularly was a bit sort of, because he always said you got to have something to fall back on. That was what his thinking was. And I'd studied electronics, but he said to me, because I always said, look, at the time I think I might have I was only earning 120, 130 bucks a week on it. I was on like a apprenticeship almost sort of deal. And I remember saying to him, look, if I DJ, I can probably earn that on one night. If I do 3 or 4 nights, I'm going to make good money. And he I think he saw, okay, I can see enough to let you have a go. And by that stage, I had a couple of nights a week DJing. I was able to pay rent at home. So my parents were both like, okay, go for it, have a shot. But it is hard. And I guess for me, the part-time job was DJing because I wanted to produce. And so, and I just knew I had this hunger right from the start when I was, going to clubs, and even before then when I saw synthesizers and studios, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And it was like this motor was turned on in me, and I had to do this, I've got to figure out how to make records and make good ones and get going, and
Well, without the hunger, mate, you got nothing, because you're going to deal with a lot of shit. You're going to deal with a lot of rejection. You're going to deal with a lot of setbacks. So it's that love and that passion for it that's going to drive you through. It's going to say, you know what, I'll keep going. And the other thing I was going to say too, and I'm sure this was evident in your career, your peer group, man. Who are the people you're fucking hanging out with while you're doing this stuff? You need to have a good supportive environment around you, doing the same sort of thing to egg each other on and to.
Well, I started. When I started working in the club, initially I ran into a guy at the train station who was a kid that I went to primary school. This is how it all started. And I remember saying to him, look, I've got these I got a couple of synthesizers and a turntable and a couple of drum machines.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone who maybe can, like a DJ or somebody who can help me, take these ideas that I've got and turn them into dance records? Mm-hmm. And he was like, this guy's name was Phil Woodman, who ended up going on to do. He was involved in the Every Picture Tells a Story. Yeah. He runs a company called Voodoo now. They do all the cutout art for all the rave parties and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, Phil said, basically, as soon as I told him, Phil was like, yeah, all my friends are DJs. And I think at the time they were probably spray painting buildings and stuff as well. They were a very sort of underground collective of graffiti artists and kind of DJs. And I think they had this like mini New York thing going on out in the eastern suburbs. But anyway, when I met him, he said, go and see this friend of mine who DJs here Saturday nights at the Croydon Hotel. Mm-hmm. So when I went in there, I spoke to him, and pretty quickly I realised there was a group of, and a lot of the guys back in those days that were making records are now gone on to bigger. I mean, we talk about Richie McNeil, who did Stereosonic. Mm-hmm. Mark James, who was doing records as Bass Culture back then. Yep. Obviously John and Andy, who have gone on to do 100. So pretty quickly, I realised there was this little underground network of people. Josh Abrahams, who you've done a lot of stuff with over the years. These guys were making records, and I kind of went, okay, there are people who are doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And going to rave parties and stuff, you'd meet people. I met some of the Psy Harmonics guys, and all this kind of Gus Till and all those sorts of And pretty quickly, it felt like it was a little bit of an exclusive club at some points. Go to especially the rave parties, the smaller raves and stuff. We used to go to Phil used to run the voodoo parties over at the Melbourne Underground Development over in Footscray. Yep. That was his thing. Yeah. And there was a little clique of people that we used to see at all these parties, and we'd sit there and talk about gear, and it was you felt like there was a little bit of a support network going on. There wasn't a lot of labels, but there was enough. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of people, but there was enough. Yeah, absolutely. And it was we were way off the radar too, because the mainstream by this stage record companies hadn't really got to grips with it yet. Yeah, I think record companies have always kind of been a little bit in a lag, but at the end of the day, look, they're about moving units, and they're only going to move units of things that are popular. And of course,
so
they wait till something's big, then they exploit the hell out of it. That's what they do.
That's what they do.
But they're at the time, I remember running into people, and we used to catch up with guys. Who, I'd meet people and say, oh, I've got a Juno 106 and a Korg Poly 6, and I've got a mini Moog and this and that. So let's get together and we just you take your gear to people's places and jam out ideas, and I was kind of. I had a bit going on because I had an old converted garage at my parents' place out in the eastern suburbs. It was quite large, so I had a fair bit of space. So I used to say to people all the time, come over to my place, I've got a big studio here, we can, It wasn't very well treated, it didn't sound acoustically very good. But
you had the space.
I had some space, I did. Yeah. And it was really good. We worked there and we got a lot done. Yeah. Where I first started working with Phil Kay and Andy Page. Yeah. First version we did a track, Summer Breeze by the Free Radicals. That was done out in the little garage. Yeah. Back in the day. Yeah. It
was good times.
Good days. Yeah,
it was very, very good days.
But there was enough. As I said, there was enough of a support network, and there certainly was enough, just enough to kind of keep you going, and you knew there were other people doing it, and everybody was sort of helping each other out. I remember going into record companies sometimes, sticking labels on things to help out for an afternoon, getting a record before it was going to be promoted and all that sort of stuff. So it was good. Yeah. Very DIY. Yeah.
All right, buddy. We've got to get out because we've got to get some. I've got to go eat some duck and pork, so we better go do that.
Thanks, my brother. Always good to chat, Tony.
Always good to chat.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching.
Great chat. We'll get you back. We'll have to get you back, man. It was great.
Absolutely, mate.
And I'll have to get John and Andy. One or both.
Maybe you need to do a panel one day. Get a panel group and do 4 or 5 people talking.
We'll fit it in somehow. Well, that would be great, actually. I think that'd be good.
Something worth thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark that one down for the future.
Absolutely, will do. All right then. Thank you very much, mate. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll leave you as I always say by saying please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.
Thank you.
And that, my friend, is the podcast.